Welcome back, Dr. Andy Kaufman. It is a pleasure to be with you. We're going to talk about the real ID again because people had lots of questions after our previous video.
All right. Well, I'm excited to talk about it. It's definitely been on my mind.
Awesome. So the first question is this. A lot of people said it wasn't as easy as we made it out to seem last time, that they could just go to the DMV and kind of backpedal if they already had a real ID. A friend of mine said actually she went to the DMV and they said, no, you can't get a regular license. It has to be a real ID. Do we have any recourse?
Well, first, let me say, what can you do easily at the DMV? Everything there is a hassle. So, this is, of course, going to be no exception. And I think it's important to understand what is actually going on here and what are the laws and such. And every state is going to be a little bit different. I did a little bit of research to see if there's anything reported about people doing this. And actually, there are several articles out there, and there are some examples of places where they will just swap it right back out for you, like Arizona. So what you need to do is, not necessarily take no for an answer. And I'm not advising you to sit there and argue with an entry-level employee at the DMV necessarily. You need to go, up the chain of command, and that might even be beyond your local DMV office. It might be to the state DMV administration. And I would suggest that you first look at what the state law is that governs this, because even though this is based on a federal statute that was passed in 2005, right? And it's actually unconstitutional because it forces the states uh, to submit to federal regulation with respect to travel and such. But it hasn't been challenged. I mean, it's been a law on the books for 20 years, but because they had to coordinate, every state had to agree to adopt this type of procedure for this ID to cooperate, and that took 20 years. And you know that there were several deadlines that got extended because they knew people would consider it a privacy concern and would not want to participate. And that's exactly what's going on right now. So you have to learn what the particular law is in your state. But I would just suggest a few different strategies. One is that you can take your real ID and report it lost and then go to get a new one. And when you go to get a new one, make sure you get a regular driver's license.
Ah,
Now, another thing that you could do, of course, as I mentioned, is that you could write letter to the administration of your state, the highest officials in the Department of Motor Vehicles with your concern and ask them for guidance, or even call their office if there's a number available. But it's always better to do this in writing, and of course that may take some time. And if you're more sophisticated with legal knowledge, or you want to learn how to do that, there is a process that you can go through called rescission. And rescission is when you essentially reverse a contract back to the point in time before the contract was entered into. So in other words, it would be like your driver's license application, which you can probably get from DMV with a Freedom of Information request. Or if you can't, there's actually ways you can just get a new application, and you can fill it out the same way you did and rescission that, and that would be successful, and you need to write a notice with this rescission. But you can essentially undo the contract that you entered into by mistake because you didn't understand the consequences of it at the time, and that is legally permissible. So that's always the extent that you could go to if you want to give this back. But even if you're stuck with it and you feel that you can't get a regular license, you can still use a substitute ID when you travel, one that is not part of this type of database. And we can get into the details of that if you like.
well, a little bit. I do want to a little bit because one argument people were pushing back about in the comments of our last reel that we did was, well, I have a passport, it already has a chip in it, or I've got my cell phone, everybody knows where I am at all times. Like, in what way is this opting out from the government's overreach into our privacy and autonomy?
Well, one thing is, although I agree that a passport does identify you and that's the purpose of it, you don't carry your passport around day to day.
Hmm.
So they can't use a passport to track you if you don't have it on your person. But
Mm.
people do carry their driver's license around on a daily basis. So, in fact, if you're stuck with a real ID, one thing you could do is take a photocopy of it and carry that around. Which, now at the current time, there are no chips in the Real ID, but there are plans for the chips to be put in the Real ID in the future. So that would be a way around having carrying a chip card with you.
Oh my gosh. And then it doesn't seem too far of a reach to think first there's no chip, then there's a chip, and the next thing you know, they want to put a chip in you.
Well, they've built it into the structure that the specific nature of the regulations with the Real ID are going to be changed or revised every 3 years. So there's a real easy opportunity to, in 3 year increments to add biometrics and chips to the Real ID. And if you look at the website of the company who has the contract, as far as I know, in all 50 states, but it may not be every single one, to administer and manufacture the Real ID cards, they specialize in biometrics. And so you can find different of their products and services on their website that show, that interest as well. So what I think is coming in the future is that one, they're going to put an RFID chip in the Real IDs, and that will contain, personally identifiable information that can be scanned by a reader. So you don't have to show it necessarily. You could just pass in physical proximity to a scanner, and that will track, your whereabouts. And then they're going to incorporate biometric information into that chip so that they'll be able to identify you. And this could very well be something like facial recognition. As any air travelers may know, over the past couple of years, TSA implemented this facial recognition software. Initially, it was a research teaching their AI how to recognize faces better. But under the Trump administration, now it's actually an alternative to showing your ID, even though it's only 90% accurate. But of course, it's voluntary. But in other words, they have trained it enough that they can have somewhat reliable facial recognition, and they could use this really practically anywhere with publicly installed cameras.
Wow. So, Andy, do you have people that encounter you that say, oh, you're just a Luddite. You're just a person that's afraid of technology. All these advancements are for our good. I want to get through the airport line quicker, you know. I want to be able to just, look into something like in one of those Mission Impossible movies and they read my eye and I can get into this confidential sequestered office. So, do you have people, naysayers, that suggest that you're just simply against technology and progress?
Right. Well, I haven't heard that specifically, and I did go to MIT, so it would be unlikely for a technophobe to go to a technical college. But I think it's important to realize that technology can be used for good or evil. And I learned about this personally because I had a medical device company when I was younger, and I invented essentially a suicide detection device that was intended to prevent suicides in jails, prisons, and hospitals. But when I was talking to a technology partner who had the type of sensor that I was looking to use in the device, they actually expressed concern that the device could be used for the purposes of torture. Like that you'd know when someone was about to, be strangulated into death
Oh my
based on the
gosh.
sensor. And of course, I never thought of that, but afterwards I realized, yes, it probably could be used in that way, of course, but that's not the way that we were developing it.
Mm.
But it stuck with me. So this technology also has that modern technology with biometrics, biosensors, all these kinds of things. They can be used for good purposes, like to assess outcomes of various health interventions, for example. Might be a good way to use certain biometric data. Maybe as a way to identify, a body that has been decomposed,
Mm.
right? That might be a good application if you had like photographs of that individual and you could use, AI to recognize the bone structure and make a positive identification,
Mm.
right? So we can think of good ways to use this technology, and I have nothing against that. But when it's used for surveillance of, everyday men and women, that's when I start to have a problem. I mean, why is it so important to know our identity to get on an airplane in the first place? It used to be that all you needed to get on a plane was a ticket to show that you paid, but you didn't need to prove who you were. I mean, you could give the ticket to someone else and they could use it. And
Interesting.
there's no reason to know someone's identity. If someone commits, a criminal act, you could always find out who they are after that, right? You can still have, security cameras and things like that you could look back after the fact at. So, these things aren't really for security purposes.
Mm.
They are, for control purposes, and that's why I am sounding the alarm here. And I do realize that we can't stop everything, right? That in order to participate in society, we need to, follow the rules to some degree. But if we resist the most egregious examples, it sends a big signal. And if people, if 90% of the people use their passport instead of a real ID, how long do you think the real IDs would stick around?
Ah, good point. It's kind of like Joel Salatin always says, you can vote with your dollar. If we're investing and buying food from local farms, big food doesn't stand a chance. We can protest all we want and ask them to change their formulations, but if we simply go elsewhere, then they're out of luck. So I really appreciate all of your insights today. It's been a pleasure, Andy. Thank you so much.
Same here, Hilda.